Hi, friends. If you enjoy our stories, please subscribe. It's free and your support helps us keep sharing these heartfelt moments. Tell us where you're watching from. Drop your city or country in the comments. Thank you so much. Now let's begin today's story. I still remember that Saturday evening. The air in Seattle carried a crisp chill. Fall had just painted the trees orange and gold. I put on my navy dress, the one I had saved for special occasions. It wasn't expensive, but it carried dignity. It carried my years, my battles, my pride. I looked in the mirror, tucked a loose strand of silver hair, and whispered to myself, "Tonight will be good. Tonight they will see me." The invitation had arrived weeks earlier. My daughter and son-in-law were hosting a grand company dinner at the Riverside Country Club. That name alone carried weight in Seattle. I had never been inside before. Membership fees were more than I made in a month back when I worked double shifts as a nurse's aide in Portland. But tonight, I belonged. Or at least I thought I did. I had raised my daughter single-handedly. I sold the small house her father and I once dreamed in. I worked nights, weekends, and every overtime hour to put her through college debt-free. I skipped vacations. I skipped birthdays of my own. Every penny went to her education, her future, her freedom. Now seeing her marry into a successful family, watching her husband climb the ladder, I believed this evening would finally honor all that sacrifice. I pictured myself sitting proudly among polished tables, listening to my son-in-law thank me for the years I had carried them through storm and hunger. I thought of the chandeliers I had only seen in magazines, the champagne I had only tasted once at my retirement party, the white linen tablecloths pressed to perfection. It was a world beyond my reach, yet tonight I would step inside. The taxi ride was 20 minutes. The driver asked if I was celebrating. I smiled, nodded, and told him, "My family is hosting a dinner." The words warmed my chest. As the car pulled up, the club glowed like a golden castle. Tall glass windows reflected the last streaks of sunset. Valet attendants in crisp uniforms opened car doors with the precision of a Broadway act. I held my small purse tight. Inside was a photograph of my daughter at age 10, smiling with missing teeth. I carried it everywhere. It reminded me why I had never given up. Walking up the stone steps, I inhaled the scent of roses lining the entrance. The faint hum of a jazz band spilled through the open doors. My heart fluttered. Inside, the ballroom sparkled. Crystal chandeliers cast amber light over rows of round tables dressed in white and gold. Waiters moved gracefully, balancing silver trays with champagne flutes. A stage stood at the far end, draped in velvet curtains. A microphone gleamed under the spotlight. Guests in gowns and tuxedos mingled with easy laughter, the kind that comes when you know you belong. I paused at the doorway, letting the warmth of the scene wash over me. For a moment, I was just a mother, a guest of honor, someone worthy of standing there. I whispered under my breath, "Carol, you've made it. This is your night too." I imagined my daughter rushing over, arms open wide. I imagined my son-in-law shaking my hand, thanking me for believing in him. I imagined pride, respect, maybe even a toast in my name. That's what I carried with me as I stepped into the ballroom. Hope. The kind of hope that glows quietly in your chest and makes you believe that love finally will be enough. The ballroom buzzed with conversation. Laughter rose and fell like waves against a shore. I took a step inside my heels, clicking softly against the polished oak floor. I expected to see my daughter. She always spotted me first. But this time, her eyes skimmed past me, landing instead on a cluster of executives near the champagne tower. Her smile was bright, but not for me. For a moment, our eyes almost met, and then she turned away. My stomach tightened. A waiter in a black vest offered me a flute of champagne. I took it, though bubbles never sat well with me. I needed something in my hand, something to steady me. I scanned the tables. White cards marked each seat names written in looping gold script. I bent closer, searching for mine. But row after row, I found everyone else's, not mine. I tried the next table and the next. All of them were full. Lawyers, board members, wives in sequins, husbands in tailored suits. But not me. Finally, at the far end near the service doors, I spotted it. A single card with my name slid crookedly on the linen. Not near family, not near the stage. Near the exit. My chest sank. I told myself it was fine, it was just a seat. But the whispers began. As I set down my purse, I caught the soft hiss of voices behind me. She's really here. I thought this was executives only. Why would they put her on the list? My ears burned. I straightened my back, pretending I hadn't heard. Pretending the laughter a few tables away wasn't about me. I glanced at my daughter again. She leaned close to her husband, her hand brushing his arm. They looked polished, like a couple out of a magazine. But neither looked my way. The spotlight shifted on stage. The MC cleared his throat. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our hosts, Mr. and Mrs. Daniel Hayes." Applause erupted. Daniel, my son-in-law, strode confidently to the microphone. My daughter walked beside him, her dress glittering under the chandeliers. The room adored them. And I sat near the shadows' applause slipping past me like rain off a window. I clapped anyway, softly, my palms barely touching. A lump pressed my throat. This was supposed to be our night, but something was shifting, something I couldn't name yet. The speeches began. Daniel thanked his board, he thanked his mentors, he even thanked the catering staff. But my name, my years, never passed his lips. Each sentence stung sharper. Not once did my daughter interrupt. Not once did her eyes search for me in the crowd. I was invisible. Then came another whisper. This one closer, from two men at the next table. "Isn't that his wife's mother?" "Yeah." "She looks a little out of place." Their eyes flicked to my dress. It wasn't designer, just navy cotton neatly pressed, dignity over price. But in their stare, I felt small. The spotlight circled the room. For a moment, its beam brushed my table, and I froze. Every eye seemed to turn, then slide away again as the light passed. Like I was a mistake they were quick to forget. I sipped the champagne. It fizzed sharp on my tongue. My hand trembled, making the glass clink softly against the rim. The MC announced the start of dinner. Guests moved toward the buffet, chatting in easy tones. No one looked my way. No one invited me to join. I sat there, the card with my name tilted on the cloth as if someone had tossed it there at the last moment. A seat for formality, not for respect. My heart whispered a question I didn't want to hear. Was I meant to be here at all? The dinner line formed quickly. Chairs scraped softly, heels tapped against the floor. Guests laughed, balancing plates of roast beef and garlic mashed potatoes. I stood thinking I might join them. But as I stepped forward, a man in a gray suit shifted sideways, blocking my path. "Oh, sorry," he muttered, not meeting my eyes. Then he turned, falling easily into conversation with another guest. I froze. My seat sat in the far corner. By the time I reached the buffet, the salmon platter was nearly bare, the roasted vegetables picked through, the rolls gone. I took what was left, a thin slice of meat, a scoop of potatoes, and returned to my lonely table. Across the room, my daughter laughed a high-polished sound. Her champagne glass sparkled under the chandelier. Daniel stood beside her, his arm draped casually around her waist. They looked perfect. They looked untouchable. And I sat by the service door with the clatter of trays and the hiss of kitchen steam spilling through the gap. I tried again. I waved gently when my daughter glanced my way. But she lowered her eyes, pretending to adjust her dress. The gesture hit me harder than any whisper could. Waiters moved past my table without pause. They refilled glasses elsewhere, topped plates, but skipped mine. I raised a hand once, hesitant, but the waiter's eyes slid away like I wasn't there. Conversations around me grew louder. The words blurred, but the laughter carried. Every so often, a head tilted my way, followed by a smirk or a shake of the head. The room felt smaller, the chandelier light too bright, pressing down like heat. I sipped my water. The ice had already melted. Who is she again? I caught the words from a table nearby. Daniel's wife's mother. I heard she doesn't do much. The woman's laugh was sharp as glass. My cheeks burned. I stared at my plate, pushing potatoes into neat lines. I wanted to vanish into the linen tablecloth. At that moment, a young assistant, barely 30, hair slicked with too much gel, leaned toward Daniel, whispering something. Daniel chuckled, glancing in my direction. My chest hollowed. I remembered sitting in PTA meetings 30 years ago, selling brownies for fundraisers, stitching costumes by hand for school plays. I remembered being her entire world. Now I couldn't even earn her glance. The jazz band shifted into a faster tune. Guests clapped lightly, cheers rose. I sat still, my fork untouched. I told myself to breathe. It's just a seating mistake. It's just nerves. But the truth gnawed deeper. I was being erased, piece by piece. I shifted in my chair, hoping maybe someone would join me. But the empty seats stayed empty. No one came. Not a single soul. When dessert arrived, servers wheeled in trays of lemon pie and chocolate mousse. The plates glided past me straight to the center tables. My corner remained untouched. The silence at my table was louder than the music itself. Every clink of silverware from the others echoed against my chest. I thought of home, my modest townhouse with creaking steps and a porch swing painted pale blue. There I belonged. Here I was an outsider. And then the MC tapped the microphone. The chatter hushed. Ladies and gentlemen, our host would like to share a special story. All eyes turned to Daniel. His gaze swept the room, sharp, confident, like a man who believed every spotlight was meant for him. And though his lips smiled, his eyes, they cut right through me. I didn't know it yet, but the real humiliation was still to come. The room hushed as Daniel took the microphone. His smile stretched wide, the kind of smile that never reached his eyes. Thank you all for being here tonight. He began, his voice smooth, the sound carried by the expensive speakers. He praised the investors. He praised his team. He praised his wife, my daughter, standing beside him like a polished diamond. Every word felt rehearsed, every compliment crafted to draw applause. And applause came rolling like thunder across the ballroom. I clapped too, though my palms ached. I wanted to be proud. I wanted to believe I still had a place here. Then Daniel paused. His eyes scanned the crowd. They lingered on me. The corner table, the crooked name card, the shadows. And of course, he said, his tone shifting, we have a very special guest tonight. Heads turned. I froze in my chair. For a heartbeat, hope sparked. Was he going to thank me? Was he going to acknowledge the years I carried his wife on my shoulders? But his smile curled sharper. Ladies and gentlemen, he said into the microphone, please welcome my wife's mother. A pause. Then he added, she doesn't do much, but hey, she showed up. The crowd chuckled, soft at first, then louder, like ripples spreading across a lake. I felt the heat rise from my chest to my cheeks. My hands gripped the table edge. The spotlight swung wide, then landed squarely on me. There I was bathed in blinding light, every eye locked on me. Some guests hid their smirks behind champagne glasses. Others whispered openly. A few laughed outright. She doesn't do much. The words echoed through the speakers, louder than the band, louder than my heartbeat. I wanted to disappear, to melt into the chair. But the spotlight held me captive. My face burned. My throat tightened. I heard the whispers. Why would he say that? Is it true she looks so uncomfortable? The silence between laughs was worse. Sharp, heavy, crushing. My daughter shifted her smile, faltering. But she didn't stop him. She didn't step forward. She didn't take my hand. Daniel raised his glass. To family, he said, still grinning as if the humiliation was part of the toast. The crowd followed, crystal glasses lifted high. To family, the word rang hollow. It cut deeper than laughter. I pressed my lips tight. The champagne on my tongue tasted bitter. The spotlight stung my eyes. I blinked and tears blurred the room. My chair screeched as I tried to push back. The sound echoed sharp against the marble floor. More heads turned, more stares. I sat frozen. My body refused to move. All I could hear was the laughter, the whispers, the silence that followed. The jazz band struck up again. The room shifted back to its rhythm. But not for me. For me, the moment stretched endless, etched into my chest like a scar. I stared at my plate. The meat gone cold, the potatoes stiff, the glass still half full. I couldn't lift it. They had erased me with one line, one joke, one cruel smile broadcast under the spotlight. And I knew this was no accident. This was deliberate. A stage, a microphone, an audience, all used to make me smaller than I had ever felt. I sat there a statue in the corner, the laughter still echoing, and for the first time that night, I wondered if I would ever recover from the sound. The laughter faded, but the sting stayed. My cheeks burned hot while the rest of me felt cold to the bone. I kept my hands folded tight enough that my knuckles turned white. If I moved even an inch, I feared I would break. Around me, the ballroom hummed again. Forks clinked against china. Chairs shifted. The band slid into another cheerful tune. For them, it was just another joke. For me, it was the moment the floor vanished. I stared at the half-empty glass. The bubbles rose, then popped, disappearing into nothing. Just like me. I wanted to stand to leave, but my legs felt rooted to the carpet. Every eye, every whisper still clung to me like a shadow. I thought of home. My little townhouse 4 miles from here. The porch swing I painted sky blue last summer. The quiet kitchen where I made coffee every morning at 6. That was where I belonged. Not here. My throat ached. I swallowed hard, but the lump remained. It pressed higher, threatening to spill through my eyes. I whispered inside my head, "Don't cry. Don't you dare cry in front of them." I glanced toward my daughter. Her smile had returned. She leaned into Daniel's arm, nodding as he whispered again. She didn't look for me. Not once. It hurt worse than the laughter, worse than the spotlight. Her silence cut deeper than his words ever could. I remembered her at 16 slamming doors telling me I didn't understand. I remembered her at 22 graduating college, hugging me so tight I thought I might break. I remembered her wedding day tears running down her cheeks as I fixed her veil. And now she stood beside a man who made me small and she let him. I picked up my fork, but my hand trembled. The bite of potatoes slid back onto the plate. I couldn't eat. I couldn't even taste. The noise of the room pressed harder. The chandelier light felt harsher. I wished for dark. I wished for silence. I wished for escape. But escape never came. I sat frozen like a photograph no one wanted to frame. I thought of all the nights working double shifts, 12 hours on my feet hauling trays, cleaning spills, counting tips in crumpled dollars. I thought of how I skipped meals to pay tuition on time, how I wore thrift store shoes so she could buy prom dresses, how I carried her through winters when the heater broke and we layered blankets just to stay warm. I carried all of it, alone, and tonight that history vanished with one cruel joke. A couple nearby laughed again. Not at me, I don't think so, but my body flinched anyway. Every laugh in that room felt like a knife. I lowered my eyes. The linen napkin blurred. Tears welled, burning hot. One slipped down, trailing across my cheek. I wiped it quickly, hoping no one saw, but a server passing by hesitated. His eyes met mine for a second. He didn't speak. He only gave a tight nod, then moved on. It was the smallest thing, but it told me I wasn't completely invisible. Not yet. Still, the ache deepened. I thought of leaving, calling a cab, walking out into the night, but my body stayed locked. Fear pinned me there. Fear of what leaving might mean. If I left, would they even notice? Would my daughter chase me? Would Daniel smirk and make another joke? Or would the night roll on as if I had never existed? The thought broke me. Tears pooled again, hotter, heavier. I pressed the napkin to my eyes, but the fabric soaked fast. The jazz band played louder. The conversation swelled, and I drowned quietly alone in a room full of people. That was the lowest point. Lower than poverty, lower than grief, lower than any loss I had ever known. I wasn't just humiliated, I was erased. And there in that corner of a ballroom, I believed for a moment that I might never rise again. The napkin was damp against my eyes. I lowered it slowly, blinking through the blur. The ballroom shimmered under the chandelier, but to me, everything looked distorted, like I was peering through water. For a moment, I thought of slipping away, calling a cab, walking out into the cool night air, letting this humiliation fade into darkness. But something inside me shifted. A memory, sharp, clear, like a stone dropped into still water. I remembered the first day I walked into that office building on Pine Street. Back then it wasn't much, just a cramped space with peeling paint and a coffee maker that barely worked. I had been the one to sign the lease. I had been the one to negotiate the first contract. I had been the one to hire the first assistant to push the first deal, to write checks with money scraped from years of savings. That company, the very company Daniel was now bragging about, had begun with me, with my risk, with my sweat, with my name on the dotted line. I wasn't a useless guest. I wasn't an afterthought. I was the foundation, the ground beneath their feet. The realization struck hard like a bell ringing clear through the fog of shame. They had laughed. They had erased me. But they couldn't change the truth. My breath slowed. My hands steadied. I reached for my purse fingers, brushing against familiar leather. Inside were documents, shareholder reports, legal papers, all still signed by me. I had tucked them in out of habit before leaving the house. I smiled faintly. It wasn't over, not yet. Across the room, Daniel raised his glass again, soaking in the glow of polite applause. He thought he was untouchable. He thought his words were the final word, but he didn't know. Not really. He didn't know that the paycheck he boasted about, the salary that fueled his lifestyle, still passed beneath my hand. He didn't know that I could withhold it, that I could end it, that power, quiet, invisible, but absolute, rested with me. The truth gave me strength. It filled my chest, pushed back against the ache. For the first time that night, I sat taller in my chair. I thought of every sacrifice, the sleepless nights, the long drives to clients, the winters when I wore the same worn coat so my daughter could afford new textbooks. I hadn't built a life of shame. I had built a company. And that company still carried my name. Daniel could mock me. The guests could laugh. But without me, none of this would exist. Not the ballroom, not the glittering stage, not the paycheck he flaunted so boldly. The thought steadied me. I sipped water cold against my lips and let the calm settle in. The humiliation still hurt. God, it hurt. But now it shared space with something stronger. Resolve. I wasn't here to beg. I wasn't here to cry. I was here to remind them who I truly was. I adjusted my seat. My reflection flickered in the silverware, a woman with gray hairline skin and eyes that no longer trembled. The night wasn't done, and neither was I. I leaned back, watching the stage, waiting, because deep down I knew my moment would come. And when it did, the truth would speak louder than any laugh. The ballroom noise swirled, but inside me a new calm had taken root. I sat taller, my hands folded steady, no longer trembling. They thought I was broken. They thought the joke had finished me. But deep down, I had something they couldn't see. Power. Not the kind that shouts, not the kind that throws fists or raises voices. Mine was quieter. Signed papers, bank accounts, contracts. The kind of power that lived on ink and law. I reached into my purse. My fingers brushed against the folder I carried. Old habits die hard. Even in retirement, I like to keep important documents close. Inside were copies of shareholder agreements, a recent payroll report, and a letter from my lawyer. I didn't bring them to fight. I brought them because I still believed my work mattered, because I still believed I mattered. Now those papers felt heavy, not like a burden, but like armor. I slid the folder closer, hidden under the napkin. No one noticed. Everyone was too busy laughing at Daniel's stories, tossing back champagne, pretending their world was untouchable. I let them. I waited. A plan formed in the quiet corners of my mind. Not vengeance, not cruelty, just truth. Truth sharp enough to cut through lies. I pulled out my phone. The screen glowed pale blue against the dim light. One swipe, one message. I typed a quick note to my assistant, Mark. He had worked with me for almost 20 years. Loyal, steady. The kind of man who knew my worth even when my own daughter forgot. Mark, I wrote, bring the payroll file. Tonight. Club ballroom. Make it discreet. I hesitated a moment, then pressed send. The message whooshed away. A quiet promise that this night wasn't over. I slipped the phone back into my purse. My heart beat steady now, like the slow tick of a clock. Across the room, Daniel raised his voice again. He was telling a story about closing $1 million deal. The crowd leaned in, hanging on his every word. They didn't know those deals only existed because I had risked everything to start the company in the first place. I let him brag, let him glow, because soon the spotlight would shift. The waiter returned this time, setting a slice of lemon pie on my table. He didn't say anything, but his eyes lingered a flicker of apology. I gave a small nod, a silent exchange, one human recognizing another. I didn't touch the pie. I wasn't hungry, I was waiting. Minutes passed. The band played. The speeches dragged on. I checked my phone again. A new message flashed. Outside, Mark wrote, "Got the file." My lips curved the faintest smile. I excused myself, quietly slipping from my lonely table toward the service door. The hallway was cooler, lined with family portraits of long-dead founders. Their painted eyes watched as I walked. I felt their weight, but not their judgment. If anything, they urged me forward. Mark stood near the side entrance, a thick envelope in his hands. He was dressed plainly khakis and a windbreaker, out of place among tuxedos and gowns. But to me, he looked like salvation. "Ma'am," he said softly, offering the envelope, "everything you asked for." I took it. The weight settled into my palm. Inside were numbers, signatures, proof. Proof that Daniel's empire stood on my foundation. "Thank you, Mark," I whispered. He nodded, once eyes kind. "I'll be here if you need me." I slipped the envelope into my purse, tucking it beneath the napkin again. Armor once more. As I walked back in, the laughter hit me first. Daniel had finished another joke. The crowd adored him, but I no longer felt small. I carried truth now, and truth was heavier than any spotlight. I sat again. My pie sat untouched, but my resolve sharpened. The night wasn't over, not yet. I looked toward the stage. The microphone gleamed still warm from his hand. Soon it would be mine. The envelope sat heavy in my purse. I could feel it there, pressing against my side, reminding me who I was. Not a shadow, not a burden, not the punchline of my son-in-law's joke. I was the woman who built the foundation he now strutted across. The music dipped, and the MC stepped forward again. Before we close the evening, we'd like to open the floor for any words from our honored guests. The room buzzed. Eyes flicked around, searching for the next speaker. I knew my time had come. I pushed back my chair. The sound was sharp, louder than I expected. A few heads turned. A few whispers rose. My legs steadied beneath me. The years felt heavy, but so did the truth. And truth carried me forward. I walked past tables draped in white linen, past champagne glasses half filled with bubbles, past the smirks that thought I was beaten. The spotlight followed me slow at first, then brighter until I stood at the stage. The microphone gleamed. I reached for it. The weight was cool, solid in my hand. I raised my chin. The room hushed. "My name is Carol Hayes." I began, my voice steady, though my heart hammered. "I am Daniel's mother-in-law, and I have something to say." The crowd shifted. Some curious, some skeptical. Daniel forced a laugh, waving his hand as if I were a child interrupting his show. But I didn't step down. I didn't smile. I didn't break. "I've listened tonight," I continued. "I've listened as my family was praised. I've listened as strangers were honored. And I've listened as I was made a joke." The room stilled. A glass clinked, then silence. "I may look old to you. I may not wear a designer gown or speak in boardroom terms, but make no mistake, without me, this company you celebrate would not exist." Gasps rippled. Daniel's smile faltered. I opened my purse, pulled out the envelope. The paper rustled sharp in the microphone. "These are payroll files," I said clearly. "Every check signed with my name. Every salary approved through my authority, including the one that pays my son-in-law." The spotlight burned bright. Whispers erupted. Heads turned toward Daniel. His face flushed, red anger crawling up his neck. "You're lying," he snapped. But his voice cracked. He knew. And some in the crowd knew too. I unfolded the papers. The signatures shone black line after line. The proof was undeniable. "I started this company 25 years ago," I continued, "in a small office with one broken coffee maker. I worked nights, weekends, holidays. I built it brick by brick. And while I stepped aside for younger hands, I never let go completely, because I knew my work mattered." The audience leaned in. No one laughed now, not a single whisper. I lowered the papers, my eyes locking on Daniel. So when you call me useless, remember who signs your checks. Remember whose name is still carved into the very heart of this company. The silence that followed was thick, heavy, alive. Then it broke. Applause first from one table, then another, then rolling across the ballroom. People stood, chairs scraped, hands clapped, not for Daniel, for me. I hadn't expected it. I hadn't asked for it. But it came, and with it, a weight lifted from my chest. Daniel stood frozen, jaw-tight fists clenched at his side. My daughter looked torn, her eyes darting between him and me. But for the first time, she didn't look away. The spotlight still burned, but it no longer stung. It warmed, it crowned, it told the truth. I set the papers down, took one steady breath, then I raised my glass. To family, I said, my voice ringing clear. But the kind of family that honors sacrifice, not mocks it. The kind of family that remembers who came before. The crowd echoed back. To family, but this time it wasn't hollow, this time it was mine. I placed the microphone down my hand, steady my heart lighter than it had been in years. And in that moment, I knew the night had changed forever. The applause thundered. It rolled across the ballroom, drowning out the band, drowning out the whispers. For the first time that night, I didn't feel small. I didn't feel erased. I felt seen. I lowered the microphone, my hands steady, my chest light. The truth had spoken. I glanced at Daniel. His face burned crimson, his smile gone, his jaw clenched tight. He looked like a man caught in a lie with nowhere to hide. Guests turned toward him. Some stared openly. Some whispered. A few shook their heads. The admiration that had shone on him earlier was gone. A man from the second row, one of the senior partners, rose to his feet. He began clapping louder, his eyes fixed on me. Others followed. Soon half the room was standing. Daniel's laugh was forced now, a hollow sound. He raised his glass as if to recover, but his hand shook. The champagne sloshed, spilling down his cuff. My daughter looked pale. Her eyes darted from me to him. She opened her mouth, closed it again, then lowered her gaze. Her silence spoke volumes. The MC cleared his throat, flustered. Well, thank you, Mrs. Hayes, for those powerful words. His voice cracked. He shuffled his cards, searching for composure. I stepped down from the stage, each step firm. As I passed tables, people leaned toward me. Some whispered, "Well said." Others nodded, their faces respectful. No one laughed now. No one smirked. The room had shifted. Daniel tried to recover. He grabbed the microphone, his voice too loud. "Ladies and gentlemen, let's not forget who runs this company today." But his words fell flat. The applause had ended. The energy had turned, and the spotlight no longer favored him. I reached my table again. The lonely corner no longer felt so lonely. The waiter returned, setting a fresh glass of water before me. His eyes met mine. This time he smiled. Across the room, I saw Daniel's assistant lean away from him as if distance might protect him. Even loyalty has limits when truth cuts this deep. The band hesitated, then played softly again. But the notes couldn't mask the tension. The night had cracked open. Everyone knew it. I sat quietly, my hands folded in my lap. I didn't need to gloat. I didn't need another word. The truth was enough. Daniel tried again, his voice strained. "Let's continue the evening." But no one clapped. No one cheered. The silence stretched. Finally, a guest stood murmuring an excuse. Then another. Chairs scraped. The exodus began. Polite smiles hid discomfort, but the meaning was clear. The grand dinner, his moment of triumph, was unraveling, and I had not lifted a single finger in anger. My daughter remained frozen. Her hand rested limply against the tablecloth. Her eyes met mine just once. There was no hatred, only shame. The night he planned to elevate himself had become the night that unmasked him. And I didn't need to say more. I had spoken, and the room had already judged. The ballroom emptied slowly. Chairs scraped. Heels clicked against the floor. The music played softer, but it couldn't hide the truth. Guests whispered on their way out. Some gave me nods. Others patted my shoulder gently. No one laughed. Not anymore. I sat quietly, my purse resting beside me. The envelope still inside, though I no longer needed to show a single page. The message was already clear. Daniel stood near the stage. His face pale, his tie loosened. He tried speaking to one of the partners, but the man only shook his head and walked away. My daughter hovered at his side, her hand barely touching his arm. For once, her smile was gone. She didn't defend him. She didn't look proud. She looked tired. It wasn't triumph I felt. It wasn't revenge. It was something quieter, relief, peace, the kind that comes when truth finally breathes. I rose slowly, my knees aching but my back straight. I walked across the ballroom one last time. The chandeliers still glowed, the roses still smelled sweet, but the room felt different. It felt lighter. At the doorway I paused. Daniel's eyes met mine. For the first time there was no mockery, no smirk, just silence, and maybe a flicker of shame. That was enough. I didn't need him to apologize. Life had already handed him the consequence. Reputation lost, respect gone. His empire cracked in front of the very people he wanted to impress. Outside, the Seattle night was cool. The sky stretched wide stars faint against city lights. I breathed deep. The air tasted clean. I called a cab. The driver pulled up a young man with music humming low through the speakers. "Good night, ma'am," he asked. I smiled softly. "Yes," I said, "finally it is." As we drove, I watched the city pass the glowing skyline, the quiet houses, the corner diner still open for midnight coffee. I thought of my home just 4 miles away, my porch swing, my blue paint, my little kitchen. That was where I belonged. Not in a ballroom full of false smiles, but in a life built with real hands, real love, and real truth. By the time I reached home, the ache in my chest had eased. I set my purse on the table, took off my shoes, and sank into the old armchair by the window. The night outside was still, peaceful. I whispered to myself, "You are not useless, you never were." And for the first time in years, I believed it. Life has a way of showing us truth when we least expect it. Sometimes it hurts, sometimes it heals, but truth always wins. Family can hurt you, family can mock you, but respect is not optional, and love without respect is just a hollow word. So I ask you this, if it were you sitting in that corner table, would your family lift you up or laugh you down? Think about it. If this story touched you, leave a comment below. Share your thoughts. Subscribe for more real family stories that remind us why truth and respect matter. Because family drama isn't just about pain, it's about finding courage to stand tall again.